Hi, welcome back to the business technology and finance lectures. In the previous recording, we started to consider the overall kind of strategic management process. We considered the steps that I need to go through to make sure that I'm making the right decision for the long-term future of the business. And we looked specifically in the previous recording at section 4, which was looking at the external environment, something that's essential for a business to make sure that they're not being outdone and they're not falling behind their competitors. Section 5 then we're going to look at in this recording, and section 5 is now going to look at us essentially. So the previous recording looked at the external environment. Now we're going to be thinking about us. So when I'm deciding what we're going to do over the next 20 years or 5, 10, 20 years, I need to consider what our business is capable of and what we're currently doing. Now we're going to focus on 4 main things here. We're going to focus on what our business has, so in terms of resources and competencies, our value chain, so considering the work of Michael Porter again, our supply chain, so our links between our suppliers that we currently have, and then thinking about the current product and markets that we have. We're going to use a couple of different approaches to do this. So the first thing we're going to look at is our position audit. So what we're going to be doing here is essentially making a list of things that we're good at, maybe things that we're bad at, thinking about what potential competencies we have down the line and how that might be used. How can I utilize all of these resources and my good bits, my strength? How can I use these to try and aim towards this overall goal or mission that we have? So for example, what tangible assets do I have? What intangible assets do I have? So tangible assets I can put my hand on, I can touch, so machinery for example. And if my potential strategy is going to be to manufacture a new product, I might need to consider whether I have the machinery available. Intangible might be looking at the knowledge I have within the business. So, do my employees have the capability to design this new product? Can I trust them in that sort of sense? What products and brands I have and what markets I currently operate in. So what kind of range of products do I have? How strong is my brand name? Again, that might fall into my intangible assets. And what markets do I currently have access to? Because if I already have access to a market, it's much easier to launch a product there. What my operating systems are. So do I have a good production system? If I'm manufacturing cars, for example, I need to make sure that my technology is up to date. And think about my distribution channels. Do I already have access to a particular market? Internal organization is going to be looking at my organizational chart and considering our strengths there. How well are we doing currently with our current markets and current products? And what returns am I currently giving to shareholders? Now, obviously, returns to shareholders are very important because that's going to give me an indication for a profit-making business of how well I'm doing. Our overall primary financial objective, remember, is to maximize shareholder wealth, and I need to make sure that I'm doing that. In terms of why that's important for my strategic planning, well, if I know that I'm giving good returns to my shareholders and that they're happy, that's going to help me then to potentially raise funds in the future. Now the 9 M's here give us a really nice checklist to make sure that I'm considering every aspect when I'm doing this resource audit. So let's just run our way through these. So first M is for machinery then. So thinking about what machinery I have, how old it is it working well? Am I currently using it to its maximum capacity? Because if not, I could be using it better. I could be getting more of a return from the existing technology. What is the makeup of my organization? So what culture do we enjoy? If we've got a very existing culture, it might suggest it's quite difficult to change. Whereas if I'm a nice flexible organization in terms of structure and culture, it might make it a bit easier for me to introduce new things. What's my management currently like? Are they good? Do I have good leaders in place? Are they loyal? Okay. Management information. So management information is crucial, and it's all about making sure I have good information to make good decisions from. So really important. What markets do I currently operate in? So what products do I sell? Who are my current customers? If I've got good loyal customers, if I've got big institutional customers, that's going to help me. What about my materials? Do I have good suppliers? Do I have good relationships with my suppliers? This idea of partnering is creating a relationship that's stronger than just supplier and customers, making your supplier an integral part of your function. What are the waste levels I'm operating at? What are my future needs in terms of suppliers, and do my current suppliers meet that? What about that human resource then? So men and women, do I have enough staff to do what I want to do? Have I got the right staff to do what I want to do? Are they efficient enough? What are my ins versus my outs? My methods, so what do we currently do in terms of activities? So my markets will show me what I'm doing, my methods will show me how I'm doing it, and then money. How am I doing in terms of my potential financing of these options? So all the way from my working capital bits and pieces, so credit periods, all the way down to my long-term capital structure and my gearing or debt to equity ratios. So really the 9Ms are just a way to try and give myself a bit of a tick list to make sure that when I'm doing my kind of resource audit, I'm actually really on top of what I should be looking out for. So if you think about the 4 things we said we were going to focus on, the first one was all about resources and competences, and with the 9Ms, I can tick that off. I can consider that I've kind of thought about those things already. Okay, next up we've got the value chain. So again, we've got Porter again, very popular theorist with strategy and kind of business management. And Porter's model was a way of looking at how we add value as an organization. So we call it the value chain, and really what we're talking about with value is essentially profit. Okay, and if you think about the ways in which a business adds profit or adds value, well, either I'm going to have to cut costs somewhere, or I'm going to have to make my product more valuable, make people want to spend more money on it. And what Porter said was, here's a bird's eye view of my organization, and I need to ensure that every single activity we have within the organization is going to help increase this margin. So here's my profit down the right hand side here, and everything I do should be trying to focus on this. Okay, so Porter split his activities into 2, support activities and primary activities, and really this was to try and focus on some of those support activities which sometimes get a bit overlooked. So your primary activities are following the product through its life. So you've got your inbound logistics, so the raw materials coming into the organization. You've got your operations, so building your good. You've got your outbound logistics, getting your product to the customer. You've got your marketing, and then you've got your after sales care. So taking a product from the very beginning right through to the end. And this is where the focus tends to be with most organizations, and rightly so, because obviously that's incredibly important in terms of my overall process. However, what Porter was very keen to highlight was the support activities, the things that make those primary activities possible. So for example, with the firm infrastructure, this is all about my support system. So my accounting team, my legal team, my administrative team, my general management, making sure that those things are all working effectively, it is going to really enable my primary activities to flow well. Human resources, just making sure I've got the right people at the right time. Okay, so if I need to focus on my kind of after sales service, for example, I need to make sure I've got well-trained staff and I've recruited at the right time. Technology development is obviously crucial, making sure I've got the right technology in place, the right up-to-date technology, again always focusing on that value adding aspect. And then finally procurement, so purchasing, so making sure that I've got all of the resources that I need to operate. So making sure I've got the best suppliers and negotiating those best prices, for example. And all of those support activities are designed to try and enable my primary activities to run as smoothly as possible. The third aspect that we needed to consider then was my supply chain. Now my supply chain is effectively making sure that I have, or my supply chain is the way in which I obtain all of those resources that I need to produce my final product. And supply chain management is making sure that at each level, so for example, if I've got my supplier, the raw materials come to me, for example, and I'm manufacturing the good, and then I sell the good onto a retailer who sell it onto the final consumer. Supply chain management is making sure that these three companies here, or organizations, are working as effectively as they can together to produce their goods and services. Because if I can make sure that the flow of goods from supplier to manufacturer and manufacturer to retail is as smooth as possible, we're going to make savings the whole way through, and it's going to benefit absolutely everybody. Now, supply chain management is, again, I guess, relatively modern in its approach, and really it's trying to make a closer relationship between those groups. So we spoke earlier, for example, about partnerships. So partnerships make a relationship much stronger than a supplier-customer. It's actually working together to try and solve problems. Trying to reduce customers served for the sake of focus. Okay, so concentrating on our core customers and where we make the most money, and actually not worrying about winning new customers when actually they're not bringing too much to the table. Trying to involve my supplier early on in terms of new products. So for example, if I'm designing a new car and I know that my new car is going to have a particular, style of kind of front bumper and light assembly, I can go to the supplier who supplies those goods to me and say, look, this is what we're thinking of doing. How possible is this? How feasible is it in terms of cost, and actually can you suggest anything that we might decide to do or might want to consider to make it a bit better? So really trying to involve as early as possible, and then, as I said, kind of joint problem solving, so making sure that we're trying to solve problems together as they arise. And again, in terms of my future strategy, how strong this supply chain is going to have a massive impact on what I'm able to do in the future. The final thing that we need to consider as part of our resource audit then was looking at our current products and market. And the first way that we're going to do that is by looking at the product life cycle. So it's really important, for example, for me to acknowledge that my products aren't going to last forever. And what the product life cycle enables me to do is to look at, well, where am I right now? What stage is my product at, or my current products at overall? And then I can think about when I need to introduce a new product. So in terms of the life cycle overall, we've got two lines here. I've got one for sales and one for profit and loss. And you can see that very early in my product life cycle, I'm not making any money. In fact, I'm losing money. So I'm spending lots of money developing my product, and then I'm selling off reasonably cheap as a sales price to try and gain some custom. It's only really when I hit this growth phase that I start making any serious cash, and I'm starting to gain loyalty here. I've got lots of marketing on the go, and then I want to try and extend this maturity period for as long as possible. This is where I'm really making the most money. It's inevitable though that every product goes through a decline, so I really need to make sure that I've got my next product ready to take over as quickly as possible, particularly if the type of product that I make has a long development. Okay, so for example, if I'm making mobile phones or smartphones, it's likely that they're going to take a while to develop. So somebody like Apple or Samsung will have the next 3, 4, 5 iterations of their flagship phones lined up, ready to go, because they know that they have to have the next big product rolling off at the right time. So the product lifecycle just enables me to think about how long I've got left, for example, in my product, and what stage each of my products is at. The final thing we're going to look at for this recording then is the BCG matrix. The Boston Consulting Group came up with a matrix that looked at my various products in terms of the market share that they have, but also the potential market growth that market has, and they plotted it on my matrix over here. So you can see we've got high and low growth and high and low share. share. And really what the goal here was to think about to think about what potentially I'm kind of generating in terms of cash, but also what I might have to spend to get there. So obviously some products are in a position where they're generating lots of cash for me, which is great, and other products are in a position where I have to spend lots of cash to try and make them into a product that generates lots of cash for me. So in terms of the exam, absolutely you're going to need to know the combinations of these. So low growth and high share means what, and high growth and low share means what, but also think about the actions required. So we'll run through these and we'll have a chat, but we'll also then think about what actions a business might choose to take. So let's start with a high market share and a high market growth. So these are stars. So essentially these require initially a bit of cash spent, so capital expenditure in excess of my cash generated to try and stay where I am, but they're going to lead, hopefully in the future, to lead to lots of money for me. So these stars are doing really well in high growth industries, and what I want to do is keep them with a high market share until that market growth starts to slow down. So what I'm trying to do here would be build. Okay, and these are the terms that the BCG group used. And all that means is I'm going to try and forego these short-term earnings and profits to try and keep my market share nice and high. So I essentially want those stars to turn into cash cows at some point, and that's when I'm going to start being able to milk all of those profits. So a star is probably going to require a bit of money, so I need to spend some cash. And like I said, the idea is that hopefully at some point they'll turn into cash cows. Now the great thing about cash cows is they have low expenditure. So I really don't have to spend lots of money on them because the market is not growing anymore, because I've got the high share, nobody's really trying to come in and take that position from me. So normally my actions are going to be to hold where I am. Okay, so if I'm generating lots of cash, I'm going to spend just enough to keep myself where I am, or I might decide to harvest. Okay, and harvest is all about trying to reap or to milk those cash cows for all they're worth. If I'm not really too worried about the long-term development of them. So those are both looking at when I've already got high market share. Over on the right-hand side of my matrix, then I've got the two low market shares. So if I've got a low market share but in a growing market, we call those question marks, and they're called question marks because they could easily go on to become stars, or they could go on to become dogs. So with a question mark, I really need to consider what I'm going to do. Now if I think it's likely that I'm going to be able to turn those with a bit of expenditure into a star, I might decide to build. I might decide to spend money and try and increase my market share. If I think that's unlikely, however, I might decide to harvest, and I'll just not worry about the long-term development. I'll just start trying to reap as much return as possible. Now with dogs, we've got a low market share and a low market growth. Now these could be cash cows or previous cash cows that we've suddenly just lost a bit of market share. Now normally we don't want to spend too much money here because I'm going to try and spend lots of money and I'm not really getting many resources. So normally what we try to do here is to either divest, which is to take out resources to use somewhere else, or if it's returning a positive cash flow, I might decide just to hold. The big problem with the BCG matrix is that by definition only one company or one product can ever be the market leader. So only one product or one company can be to the left hand side of this line. And what that means is there are lots of products out there, successful, established, popular products that would be classified as dogs. So it's not a case of get rid of dogs all of the time. You might decide that actually with relatively low spending you can just hold on to your position there and actually make some positive cash flows. Okay, that's all for our resource or position audits. In the next recording then we're going to move on to corporate appraisal, which is trying to bring these things together.